In this video, we're going to be taking a deep dive into the standard suspension geometry on our BMW M2 to see just how they come out of the factory. As we go through this series, we're going to be applying each upgrade one by one and overlaying that data with professional racing drivers to show exactly what a difference each upgrade makes to the chassis. But in this episode, we're going to be starting right back at the basics. We're going to be taking a dive into the standard suspension geometry on the BMW M2 as we have the brand new car straight from factory, so we want to take a look on our alignment system and see exactly how it comes out of the box. We're back at the workshop now and we've got the car straight on the ramp and strung up. So this is the first time that we've actually put the strings on our M2. So I'm quite intrigued to see what settings we get, and we've not actually looked. So we've just got the kit all set now and we haven't measured a single bit of toe or camber yet on the car. So all we've done is set the rig up on the car. We've not measured the toe or the camber as of yet. So I'm quite intrigued to find out how this car measures up fresh from the factory. This is as new as it gets in terms of alignment, so this is how BMW have delivered this car. And I am hoping it is actually a little bit all over the place, because out the box this thing is quite twitchy and nervous. So I do hope that it is due to geometry in one aspect, because on B roads and A roads where it's quite undulating, it does feel a bit nervous and twitchy, and it feels like the rear end isn't square. So we're going to take a look now and see what it's measuring up as. Okay, so yeah, there it is. I mean, I've been measuring the whole car up. I started with the cambers as usual, and I've just checked the toe, and straight away on this wheel, I thought actually it was in the camber because the camber difference alone explained what we were feeling, but now the toe also matches up, and basically this wheel is the problem straight out of the factory. So I'll just talk through the numbers we got and just explain how that translates into how the car drove. It actually aligns completely perfectly as well, which is quite nice as well from a driver and a setup point of view, that the settings match exactly how the car drove. So it's not even just like in your head at that point, it really has matched up with the settings on the car. So at the back, we have, in terms of camber right now, negative 1.8 degrees on the passenger rear, and this side was measuring up at negative 1.5 degrees, so near enough, so within 0.002 on each side. I'm just summarising to get as close to the main numbers as possible. So negative 1.8, negative 1.5, so straight away through a corner, the negative 1.8 side of the car is going to have more tyre contact patch to lean onto as you're pushing hard through the corners, and this had the snap oversteer through left-handers. So as we're going through left-handers, it would give the push understeer and then it would snap oversteer more aggressively through the lefts than it did through the rights. I'm trying to think if it ever actually did it through a right-hander, and I can't recall when it actually did, but it definitely did it through a few key left-handers. So that's because we're actually falling back off the tyre contact patch as we're going through that corner. So imagine it, so you're going through the corner, you're going to load up that wheel, and then you're going to roll back off the contact patch again. So it effectively goes to positive camber as you translate all that mass over onto the outside axle. So you're going to rock back off the tyre, then you're going to lose grip, and it's going to snap oversteer. That's exactly what we felt. It's actually something we picked up on in the G series sort of quite early on in its life, where the rear cameras weren't enough. This has actually got a bit more than I expected to see out the factory, because they used to come out the factory sort of negative 1.3 degrees on the rear axle, and that led to sort of a bit of a pogo bunny hop effect. And as you went through the corner, that effect was basically what I just described there, where you're leaning back off the contact patch, and as it slips, it basically takes the lateral load out of the chassis and sits back down on the tyre and grips up again. And you think, oh, that was odd, and it leads to sort of bum wiggle sensation. As you push again, it leans back off the tyre, slips, sits back down on the tyre contact patch again, and you end up in this repetitive process where you never have confidence in the rear axle, and that's what that is. You don't have enough camber to lean onto. So interesting to see that on this wheel alone though, whereas the other side of the car has a lot more camber than I'd expect to see out the factory. So maybe that's actually the mistake over that side, but that's what we'd like to see, whereas this side is what we'd expect to see out the factory, but a big imbalance in terms of left to right. But then we come to measuring the toe after the camber, and this wheel again has a setting that does not aid traction at all. So the left rear, the passenger rear, had 2 millimeters of toe in. Again, a nice setting to have on the back axle of one of these cars, whereas this wheel is dead straight, completely parallel. And a completely parallel toe on a rear-wheel drive car is asking for oversteer, effectively. So the best way to describe that is when we were getting on the throttle in the previous sort of road test, when we were taking third gear, we noticed that the car liked to snap on third gear under full throttle if the shift was quite aggressive. And the way it snapped every single time was anti-clockwise. And when you measure the rear toe, that makes a lot more sense, because you've got the passenger side rear towing in, and then the driver side rear dead straight. So what that effectively has is a rear axle that wants to go to the right. So that equals an anti-clockwise rotation from the rear, and you're counter steering down to the right to correct that. And that's exactly what was happening. So as we lost traction, the rear axle steered to the right and counter steered the car anti-clockwise. So we're going to get these settings corrected. We're going to get our settings installed on this car for fast road use. And we're also, for the first time actually in one of these videos, we're going to be giving you those numbers at the end of this video too. At the front axle, we measured the cambers across the front at negative 1.5, give or take a very small amount of camber, so roughly negative 1.5 on the front wheels, and this is not adjustable as standard. So ideally we'd like to see quite a lot more camber than that, especially with the front tyres being so wide at 275 profile width tyres. That's a very, very wide front tyre, so we can definitely afford to start dialing in quite a good amount of camber on the front axle without losing too much straight line traction on the brakes. So negative 1.5 is nowhere near enough camber to have the nose exactly where we want it when we're pushing hard, and that is why we have chronic understeer effectively, because we're just constantly pushing through that tyre because there's an absolute lack of camber. This is the top mount off the stock shock, so this isn't off this car, but this is the one that would fit this car, and it is a standard top mount, so it has two locating pins that lock into the chassis and a central hole effectively. So this assembles to the damper, locks into the chassis and is then bolted down, and this, once bolted up, cannot be moved around, so we can't add any additional camber to this car. So that's a real holdback in the M chassis. It's also something we had in the F series chassis. They again had no camber adjustment on the front axle, and they need a camber plate to give that camber adjustment. Again, this car is going to need a camber plate to give it that camber adjustment. We do have our own as well, which also add in caster, which we'll get to at a later date in the series as well. So we will be upgrading to our camber plates quite early on in this series to get more front end from this car. So that's something we really, really need to address. I mean, we can see as well on the tyres that we are scrubbing right to the outside edge as well. It's a bit hard to see because it's been tyre shined for the new livery, but you can see that the tyre is really pushing over right to the outside edge, and similar to the rear. Again, this is the issue that as we're going through that corner and we're transferring that mass to the outside tyres, we're actually rocking off the contact patch. So if we already start with the wheel quite upright and straight, then the issue we're going to have is that as soon as we go through a corner, we're going to be knocking over onto positive camber immediately and lifting the inside edge of that contact patch up, and then we're just going to lose all of that grip as it pushes through the corner. So we know that is an issue. We're going to be showing this as well, because similar to our Porsche series, V-Box Motorsport are going to be supplying some infrared optical sensors, again for this build, and we're going to be installing these in this car so we can bring you the same level of data that we brought you with our Porsche series, showing exactly how that tyre is working on the live, completely fly around that track. So we can see through every corner and every straight and every braking zone what the tyre is doing in terms of temperature, and therefore how much grip we are or are not getting from that compound. So that's going to be really, really interesting to see. So that is why we haven't just gone straight for camber plates, we haven't lowered the car, we haven't got stuck into the build just yet, because we want to bring you that exact data with professional drivers at the wheel to prove the product and to prove the upgrade and to show exactly why they're needed. We're not just recommending the part, it's an actual need for the chassis to have these upgrades to get the most out of the tyre, to get the grip ultimately from the chassis. So we're really, really excited to get stuck into this build and bring that data your way. In terms of toe, again, we've checked the front axle. Steering wheel in the straight line was nice and straight, and it turned quite nicely, and we've got about 1 millimetre toe in on the front axle. One side is just under that, so we're actually going to increase both to 1 millimetre toe in. So that's going to give us really nice stability at high speed when we're cruising on the motorway for just general fast road driving. But what it's then going to give as soon as we want to go off centre is going to give us that pointy directional nose, because we're not waiting for the lead tyre to come in. It's just going to turn immediately past the 0 point and straight to toe out so we can get turned into that corner. So it's a really nice fast road setting to have on the front axle. So we've measured it up, we've identified some fundamental flaws at the rear, there are actual issues in the geometry, and also some drawbacks from the design of the front suspension system that we can't fix right now. So what I'm going to do is get to the back axle and the front toe as well, and I'm going to install our settings, and then we'll let you know exactly what we've put on this car. We've just finished installing our sort of fast road geometry settings on the G87 M2 now, so we've fixed the issues that we found, and we've also changed all of the numbers on the car to our own settings that we like to get the chassis more agile on the road and put the grip down better and give a lot more stability as well. It improves drivability quite a bit, so it's well worth doing at this stage just to make the car more enjoyable and remove those issues that we had out on the road. As standard, all we can adjust on this car is rear camber, rear toe, and front toe. At the back, we are limited. We're in a specific window of rear camber and toe before they fight each other, and we have to start compromising on settings. So the numbers we put on the car work really well together with the standard hardware. And at the front, we know we are still very limited in terms of camber, but at this point, we can't change that with a geometry alignment. We have to leave it as it is, which is quite frustrating, to be honest, because we know there's so much more to unlock there, but at this point we have to leave it where it is for a later date. So the numbers we've actually put on the car are at the rear, we're going to run at negative 1.8 degrees of camber, so that we've got a nice tyre wear in a straight line. So if you're using this car on a day-to-day basis, it's not going to excessively wear the inner edges, but it's going to give enough contact patch to lean onto through the corners to give that rear stability that we're looking for in the dry. Also, in the wet weather conditions, it's not going to be so much camber that we have a loss of traction on throttle. It's going to give us enough grip because it's such a wide profile tyre in a straight line, but just give us that additional benefit through the corner too. Then the toe settings that we're going to run are 2mm toe in per wheel at the rear axle. So this is measured from the front to the back of the rim, and it's 2mm of toe in. So we're towing it inwards towards the centre line of the chassis. So that's the front edge of the rear rims pointing inwards and the rear edges pointing slightly outwards. This gives us traction and stability. So it means that in a straight line, the tyres are really going to dig in and give us the grip we're looking for to give us the push down the road. It's also an even number, so it's going to push the car in a nice straight line. And then through the corner, it's also going to give us a bit of inward traction and stability as we're going through the bend. It's going to give us more grip at the rear axle that we can rely on and trust as we're going through that corner. So really nice numbers to run for fast road. At the front axle, again, we've gone for 1mm of toe in. So very slight amount of toe in on the front wheels. And this is to give us, again, high speed stability, good wet weather conditions as well. We don't want to compromise too much on that if it's a fast road car, but it means that we're going to have a really nice pointy front end without it being too sharp and aggressive. So a lot of BMW setups actually tow out the front wheels, and this is something we would do if the car was for mainly track use, but with it being mainly road use, we keep it towing in for stability and for braking stability especially. If you tow the car out in the front, it can follow the road, it can tram line, and under heavy braking it can pull left or right as well. So not nice things to have on a car for road use in general. So we tow that in. So we are in a compromised position in terms of the overall settings, but that is what fast road is effectively. You're optimizing the settings to keep the car usable on a day-to-day basis, safe on the roads as well, but then extract even more performance than how it came out the factory. So really nice settings that we're going to head out now with this car and just see what we think. And this is what we're going to be using as a basis to move forward with the build. So we had to get the car to a point where we were happy with the settings, because if we'd used that as a basis out the factory, it wouldn't have been a reliable starting point, because we'd have started adding our upgrades to this car with the geometry that was all over the place. That isn't a fair comparison for how the car is out the box. It is now a fair comparison because we've optimized what we have out the factory. Then as we start to add components to make it even better, we have a fair starting point that we can overlay data with that we know is a really nice consistent base setup to work from. Now we've got the geometry alignment complete, we're going to de-rig the car, we're going to put the car in the air on the lift, and we're going to just have a little look underneath at some of the suspension components and just generally underneath the car, because it's not something you often get to see when you buy one of these, because it's very rare you get it on a ramp and then get to go underneath to have a look yourself. So we're going to head underneath and just see anything of interest under there. So right at the front of the car, we've also got one of the oil coolers, which is super exposed, and we saw this on the F series, but it's actually more exposed on the Gs. And it's just like, if you have a speed bump impact or something on the front axle, that is going to lead to a lot of trouble. So it always surprises me that they put that there with no protection. I get why they did it in terms of airflow and heat management, but in terms of a sort of impact protection from stones or rocks and stuff like that, it seems like a pretty dangerous place to position that. Into the front wheel arch, very, very similar at the front in terms of makeup to the F series, so like the F80 M3, the F87 M2s, that sort of thing. So very, very similar. One thing that is very different, I'd say, not very different, quite different, is the length of the front lower control arm. So the front thrust arm is a lot longer than the F series arms, and that's going to give a lot more stability through the range of travel of the suspension. So this actually means when we're going to lower this car eventually, it won't pull or push the wheel too far forward or backwards, which is quite a nice feature to have in suspension, to have that long range consistency. Obviously on the G87 M2, the ride height is a lot more than most other M cars. It rides very, very high, this car. So we're going to have to lower this quite a lot more than we would be lowering an F chassis, for example. So it's quite nice to see that the suspension assembly will actually account for that drop, so we're not going to have to worry about the kinematics after we've lowered it. Things like roll centers and things will be affected though. It's hard to get around that, but that's something we can address later down the line when it goes more track focused. And again, that's quite an exciting area to delve into as well in terms of suspension design. So I won't get started on that now because you won't be able to stop me. So yeah, otherwise at the front we've got McPherson strut assembly, so we're not double wishbone like the M5s for example, we're still McPherson strut like on the F series M cars as well, so that means we have the damper that mounts to the hub which connects us to the car, and the angle of that damper can determine caster and it can determine camber as well. So again, when we come to fitting our camber plates, that will give us a big difference on the front axle as well. We've got electronic shocks, so we've got the button inside the car which allows us to change the dampers in terms of their stiffness rate, and that's due to the plug in the top of the damper. So again, we've got electronic adaptive shocks on this car too. The front drop links are a lot longer than the F series. Again, that's just more for packaging reasons more than anything. They've got very similar sized roll bars, a little bit thicker by the looks of it, but nothing outstandingly different there. So yeah, front axle is quite similar. I'd say the biggest difference on the front suspension assembly is probably the brakes. I mean, the brakes are absolutely huge on the G series M cars compared to what came from the factory on the F series M cars. So the brakes are definitely a major step forward. Like the steel brakes on this M2 were great around Donington Park, even with Chris at the wheel, absolutely hammering these brakes around track. And even he said he was blown away by the performance of the brakes. So we haven't yet experienced fade on these brakes, which is very impressive for steels, very impressive for the stock pads as well. We've not even changed the pads at this point. So out the box, brakes are a big, big plus point, and you can tell that BMW have spent quite a lot of time in that area. You can tell that that's where most of their attention has gone. When they've come back to the drawing board with this car, you can tell that they've definitely heard the feedback from the market, and they've responded to that with the brakes in particular, and they've put a lot of energy into making sure they work properly. So yeah, very, very impressive upgrade on the front axle there. Coming towards the midsection of the underbody, something that stands out actually is these turning vanes. So this isn't something we've seen often on an M car. This is something we're very familiar with seeing on the Porsche GT cars. They often have underbody aero vanes, similar on the McLarens, the Ferraris, as they want to clean the airflow up underneath the car to activate the rear diffuser and activate the actual underbody aero of the car. But on this car, I don't think that's going to be why, because I mean, if you look rearward of those turning vanes, you've just got messy air all together. So you've got diff in the way, you've got the exhaust, there's no actual rear diffuser. It's a semi-flat floor, but a very messy underbody that you would be cleaning airflow for. So I don't think it is that. All I can really think at the minute, what it could be, is that we're guiding air away after the front wheels to maybe keep the heat from the brakes out from the underbody. So that means that we're getting cooler air through to the diff cooling vanes, which are right in the middle there, and they're very, very deep cooling vanes. So all I can really think is that they're there to aid cooling to the diff, to keep that more consistent, because as they work really hard, they can get quite hot. So it's definitely more efficient to keep the diff as cool as possible. I mean, if you can think of any better reason why they are there as well in the comments, I mean, let us know what you think as well. But in terms of actual aero benefit, I can't see that being great for aero benefit itself. There's not a lot of air cleaning positives when you go rearward in this car. Maybe if we put an actual proper diffuser on this thing, then we can activate the aero properly and increase these vanes and make it more like a Porsche underbody down the line. That would be really cool to see. Backwards from that, we've got the OPFs. So these are something that we know are an issue already. When we took this around Donington, we were blown away by the amount of heat coming out the back of this car. And this is something I actually had a phone call with Tom Wrigley from Tom Wrigley Performance about, because he tunes these all the time to quite a high level as well. And I said about, what's the next sort of steps in making one of these faster, what tunes can we do? And he said straight away, minimum you want to get a tune on the car with the OPFs removed. And this is something we've done on our GT4, so we know the benefits of doing it in terms of power and torque. But what was mind-blowing was the amount of heat that was coming out the actual exhaust pipes. It melted our cover plate. So when we go on track days, we have like Suspension Secrets cover plates over the top of our actual number plates, and it came back off track and it was gone, and it had turned into goo on the rear bumper because the amount of sheer heat coming out the exhaust pipes had physically melted the number plate after about 3 laps as well. It wasn't a huge amount of laps, so I've never seen that amount of heat coming out of a tailpipe. And these OPFs apparently are basically solely responsible for that heat build-up in the exhaust system, which leads us on actually, quite interestingly, to a very common issue with this car when they're tracked, and we think the OPFs are actually going to be the main factor behind this. So we'll move backwards and we'll chat about that. Moving to the rear of the car, it's very familiar territory back here. It's very, very similar to the rear end on our F80 M3 and the F Series M cars. The subframe design, with it being a solid tubular layout with no bushes where it mounts the actual car itself, it's all a very solid rear subframe design. That's for performance and for strength, so it removes a lot of flex from the rear end, like you see in the M lights, for example. So it's a really nice rigid rear axle. Bracing at the back from these aluminium braces, also a lot more substantial than we used to seeing back here on the F-Series cars. The rear traction, rear toe and camber arms are very similar to the F-Series, again with the anti-roll bar, very similar, if not a tiny bit thicker, but yeah, very similar to F-Series, just with some very slight differences there. So nothing major to report in terms of suspension at the rear. However, coming to the issue that we know is a problem, because Hype Motorsport, one of our partners who have hire cars for track use, they have a G87 M2 Club Sport build that we built for them, and they said they keep on destroying rear shafts. And in particular, the inner CV joint on the rear shafts are quite prone for failure when you track these cars. And when you look at the layout of the exhaust system, it's not surprising why, because the exhaust itself, which we know gets excessively hot, a lot hotter than we'd expect it to get, is directly below, about 30 or 40 millimeters away from the actual inner CV itself. And when I say directly below, it is exactly in line with the rubber CV boot, and heat rises, so that's going to cause an issue. It's going to put all of that latent heat into the boot, it's going to cook the grease, and it's going to destroy the bearing effectively. So it's always going to happen. So we need to come up with a solution for that fairly quickly, because we don't want to just be going through drive shafts, because it's quite an expensive process, quite a time-consuming process as well. So if anyone in the comments has come across this issue and has fixed the issue, do let us know what solutions are out there and what you've used to combat that, because we are keen to get that solved before we start aggressively tracking this car, because we don't want to go into something just knowing there's going to be a load of issues waiting for us. So definitely let us know about that. In the next episode, we're going to be installing the first suspension upgrade for this car in terms of hardware, and we're going to be getting our infrared tyre temp sensors installed into the wheel arches in the exact position, so we can bring that data your way very soon. So make sure you don't miss out on that.